The Lives We Did Not Choose, Chapter 1. The first lie was small enough to sound merciful. No, Arthur told his wife, staring at the phone vibrating on the kitchen table. I don't know anyone by that name, but he did. God, he did. 23 years disappeared the moment he heard Claire's voice again. Not the young voice he remembered from hotel rooms and train platforms and one terrible winter in Florence. This voice was lower now, slower. A voice that had survived disappointment and learned how to carry it elegantly. His wife dried her hands with the towel and studied him for a second too long. Whoever she is, she said softly, she still matters to you. Arthur did not answer quickly enough. The rain started after midnight. By then, Evelyn had gone upstairs with her novel and her reading glasses, leaving behind the faint smell of lavender cream and tea. Arthur remained in the kitchen long after the dishes had been done. The house around him settled into its ordinary nighttime sounds. Old pipes, the refrigerator humming, branches touching the gutters. He poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey he did not want. The phone lay silent on the table. At 62, silence had become the dominant texture of his life. Not unpleasant silence, earned silence, the kind that comes after decades of marriage, routine, compromise. Evelyn no longer asked questions whose answers might wound her. Arthur no longer volunteered truths that would force either of them to reconsider the architecture of their lives. They had become careful with each other. He used to think care and love were the same thing. Rain slid against the windows in thin silver lines. Finally, he picked up the phone and checked the missed call again, though he already knew the number by heart now. London area code. No voicemail. Claire never liked leaving evidence behind. Arthur leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. Immediately, memory arrived, not gently. Florence, February 1999, a pension overlooking the Arno, the radiator clanging through the night. Claire standing barefoot at the window in one of his white shirts, smoking with the window cracked open despite the cold. You're staring again, she had said. I'm trying to memorize you. That's a terrible idea. Why? Because eventually you'll need to forget me. She said things like that sometimes, calmly, as though she were discussing weather. Arthur had laughed then because he still believed tragedy announced itself properly, with shouting, with betrayal, with doors slamming. He did not yet understand that the most dangerous losses arrive quietly, while 2 people are still pretending they have time. The bedroom light was on when he finally went upstairs. Evelyn was awake, though her book had fallen closed against her chest. She looked toward him over the top of her glasses. You're brooding, she said. I'm thinking. That's usually the prettier word for it. Arthur changed slowly into his nightclothes. He could feel her watching him with the particular attentiveness long marriages develop, not suspicion exactly. Familiarity sharpened into instinct. Was it work? She asked. No. A former student? No, she waited. Arthur sat carefully on the edge of the bed. An old friend, he said at last. Evelyn nodded once, but the movement carried no relief. From when before? A small silence entered the room. Before, not before dinner, before retirement, before children, before her. Evelyn removed her glasses and folded them neatly atop her book. That's a dangerous word at our age, she said. Arthur looked down at his hands. He wanted to tell her nothing had happened, because technically nothing had. A phone call, a voice. Memory stirred from its grave, but already he could feel something shifting inside him with the terrifying ease of a locked door opening. She's in London, he said. I gathered that much, she called unexpectedly, and you lied to me unexpectedly. The sentence landed softly between them. Evelyn had always spoken quietly when hurt. Arthur sometimes wished she would shout instead. Anger at least possessed direction. Her restraint left him alone with himself. I'm sorry, he said. Yes, she replied. I imagine you are. Then she turned off the lamp. Arthur did not sleep. At 3 a.m, he went downstairs again and sat in darkness beside the kitchen window. Rainwater trembled in the garden. There had been a time when Claire called him every night, even if only for 3 minutes, even if she was halfway across another country, especially then. They met when he was 38 and lecturing briefly at Oxford. He was 41, married to a journalist whose absences had become more permanent than his presence. Arthur himself had been married 11 years already. Evelyn was pregnant with their second child when Claire first touched his wrist during a faculty dinner and changed the emotional temperature of his life forever, not because the touch was seductive, because it was understanding. There are people who enter a room carrying recognition with them. Dangerous people. They see not who you have become, but who you almost were. Claire had looked at him that night as though she remembered him from somewhere impossible. 3 months later, they were in Florence together. 2 years later, they ended it beside a taxi stand in New York during freezing rain. No screaming, no scene. Claire simply said, "If we continue, one of us will destroy a life we can't rebuild." Arthur asked, "And if we stop?" She smiled then with terrible sadness. "We'll do it anyway, just more slowly." Then she kissed him once and left. Afterward, he returned to Evelyn fully, or as fully as he could. He became dependable with almost religious discipline, school recitals, mortgage payments, summer holidays in Dorset. The accumulated gestures of a decent man. Sometimes he even believed himself, until tonight. The phone rang at 3:17 a.m. Arthur froze. Once, twice, by the third ring he answered. Neither of them spoke immediately. Then Claire exhaled softly into the silence. "I thought you might still be awake. You always did enjoy ruining my sleep." A faint laugh, older now, frayed slightly at the edges. "I'm sorry," she said. "I shouldn't have called earlier." "No," Arthur answered. "Earlier was easier." The rain deepened outside. "How are you?" he asked. There was a pause long enough to become meaningful. "I've been better." His grip tightened around the phone. "What happened?" "You still go straight to catastrophe. You only call after midnight when catastrophe is involved." Another silence. "Then Daniel died in November." Arthur closed his eyes. Daniel, her husband, though husband had never been the correct word for the last years of that marriage. Companion, perhaps. Witness, co-survivor. "I didn't know," Arthur said quietly. "Of course you didn't." "I'm sorry, yes." Her voice thinned slightly. "So am I," he heard ice shift inside a glass near her end of the line. London noises behind her. A distant siren, traffic hissing over wet streets. "You're drinking whiskey," he said. "You remember everything annoying about me. You hated whiskey." "I hate many things that became necessary." Arthur almost smiled despite himself. Then the smile vanished. "Why did you call, Claire?" At once the air changed. He could feel her deciding how much truth to permit. "Yes, finally," she said, "because there's something I need to tell you before I lose my nerve." Arthur stood and crossed toward the window. His reflection hovered faintly in the glass. Gray at the temples now, shoulders slightly bent. A man weathered by ordinary years. "You're frightening me," he said. "I know." Another pause. Then, "I saw your daughter." Arthur blinked. "What, in London?" 3 days ago. My daughter lives in Manchester. She was in London. How would you even recognize her? I saw photographs once." Cold moved slowly through his chest. "What did you say to her?" "Nothing, Claire. She didn't know who I was." Arthur pressed his hand against the counter. Outside, rain battered the dark garden. "Then why does this sound like a confession?" Because now she was crying, not dramatically. Claire would rather die than cry dramatically. He heard only one uneven breath, then another. "She came into the gallery where I volunteer," Claire whispered. "Arthur, she has your face at 25. It nearly stopped my heart." Arthur said nothing. "She smiled at me," Claire continued. "Just politely. She bought a catalog, then she left." A small broken laugh escaped her. "And suddenly I realized I am old enough to vanish from your life completely." "Claire, no. Listen to me." He obeyed because he always had. "I spent 23 years telling myself we did the honorable thing," she said. "I defended it. I built my life around it. But your daughter walked out that door and I understood something horrible." The line crackled softly between them. "I don't know if it was worth it anymore." Arthur felt the room tilt subtly around him. Upstairs, the house remained still. Evelyn asleep, perhaps, or awake and listening to the absence beside her. "Why now?" he asked quietly. "Because Daniel is gone. Because I'm 64 years old. Because I can suddenly feel time narrowing." Her voice hardened with effort. "Choose whichever explanation sounds least pathetic." "You were never pathetic." "No," Claire said. "Just cowardly." Arthur leaned his forehead against the cold window. For a long moment neither spoke. Then he asked the question he had avoided for 2 decades. "Were you happy?" Claire inhaled sharply. The silence afterward was answer enough. At breakfast, Evelyn burned the toast. Not badly. Just enough. Arthur noticed because she never burned toast. Morning light filled the kitchen with merciless clarity. The rain had stopped. Everything looked recently judged. Evelyn set his plate down carefully. "You spoke to her," she said. "It was not a question." Arthur nodded. "How long?" "I don't know." "That long, then." She sat across from him with her coffee untouched. Evelyn was 60, beautiful still, though not in the way magazines understood beauty. Her face had become more itself over time, stronger around the mouth, softer around the eyes. Arthur had once believed there would be nobility in growing old beside someone who knew you completely. Now he wondered whether complete knowledge simply exhausted romance eventually. "Do you love her?" Evelyn asked. Arthur looked up sharply. "You think we're too old for that question," she said. "No." "Then answer it." He opened his mouth, closed it, and there it was, the true damage. Not the affair from decades ago, not the phone call, the hesitation. Evelyn absorbed it without visible reaction. She lowered her eyes to her coffee. "Say, I used to think infidelity was the worst thing that could happen in a marriage," she said. "But I don't anymore." Arthur felt suddenly ill. "What do you mean?" "I think the worst thing is discovering your husband has been emotionally elsewhere for half his life." "That isn't fair." "No," she agreed softly, "it isn't." The kettle clicked quietly behind them. Arthur stared at his untouched breakfast. "I stayed," he said finally. Evelyn looked at him then. Really looked. "Yes," she replied. "You did." Nothing in her voice made him feel virtuous. A car passed outside on the wet street. Then Evelyn asked, almost gently, "If she asked you to come to London, would you go?" Arthur did not answer quickly enough. Again,